I'll start with the introduction of the examiners. Next to me is Dr. Yali, who is the external examiner. Then we have Kofi Ejekum, the PhD candidate. Next to Kofi is Dr. Ajekume, who is the internal examiner. Next to Dr. Ajekume in the tie, what color is that? Brick, is Dr. Cranton, who is the supervisor and now an examiner. And then the last but not the least is Professor Joshua Ayapa, the first examiner. On my left is Professor R.C. Abedu, the Dean of the Graduate School. And then next to him is Regina Inokun, Assistant Registrar from the Graduate School. And on the screen, I believe we've all seen is Dr. Chris Goodyear from Loughborough University. And behind is the public. And I would like to do this last introduction. We have the privilege of having our provost, Professor Ebedu, in our midst, and our college registrar, Mr. Debra, also in our midst. There are a couple of PhD students and lecturers who are joining us for this presentation. Thank you very much.
So if you are ready, then we'll start.
Good morning, panel. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Kofi Adekun, and this is a PhD presentation on the topic Dampness in Walls of Residential Buildings in Ghana, lead source, diagnosis, and proposed treatments. Before I start, this is just a brief outline of the presentation. Without the background to the study, the problem statement, key concepts from literature, methodology, key findings, implications of findings, conclusions, limitation of the study, and then some recommendations. Now, buildings by their very nature are composites of different materials, and each perform their own functions differently. Old or modern types of construction are prone to natural and man-made mechanisms of deterioration. And studies have shown that of all the defects which are associated with buildings, moisture is the most frequent and dangerous, and it contributes more than 50% of all known building failures worldwide. Now, when moisture, which should not be present in a building, accumulates in that building, the building is said to be suffering from the problem of dampness. And its effect on the structural integrity of materials in buildings is really reported in literature. It arises from a number of different sources, and it is accompanied by varieties of effects, which include wall staining, mold growth, impairment of air quality, amongst others. In the Ghanaian tropical climate, which is mostly characterized by high rainfall with relatively high and medium temperatures, this problem of dampness is very common in many public and private buildings. And the preliminary investigations which was carried out prior to the start of this research revealed that the problem has assumed an alarming dimension in many residential buildings in Ghana. And from the preliminary study, we realized that one of every 10 residential buildings is affected by this problem, some of which are visible and then others not. Generally, the level of the awareness of the problem among building occupants and construction professionals in Ghana is very high. And because of that, it has led to the adoption of various methods, which include the construction of aprons at wall bases, tiling of wall bases, replastering, among others, to combat this problem. The significance of the problem is also reflected by the diversity of products which we have on the world market. And owing to this wide and differentiated offer, together with the scarce literature on the effectiveness of such methods, it has become very difficult for professionals who work in the industry to find suitable solutions to this problem. As a result of that, the problem of dampness keeps escalating with no sure ways of combating it. As a result of this problem, the study was undertaken, and its aid in identifying and diagnosing the lead source of dampness in residential buildings in Ghana and recommending suitable treatment mechanisms to address the problem or control the problem. Amongst the objectives which were set were, one, to identify the lead source of dampness. And when we talk about the lead source, I'm talking about the most dominant type of dampness in the walls of residential buildings in Ghana. To conduct laboratory diagnosis of the lead source of dampness in walls of residential buildings, and to explore treatment mechanisms that can control the lead source of dampness through field trials. Much attention has currently been drawn by house owners to the problem of dampness in their buildings, and researchers in Ghana have been called upon to address this problem. Diagnosing the true cause of dampness plays a significant role in providing lasting solutions to the problem. This study, which was undertaken, offers detailed and practical ways to effectively investigate and report on dampness issues using modern equipment and gadgets. The exploration of the treatment mechanisms widens the scope of stakeholders on how basic construction principles could be adopted to control the problem. The study also sets a platform for stakeholders to come together and find solutions to the problem of dampness. Now, initially, the study concentrated on a nationwide survey of the problem of dampness in residential buildings in Ghana. It sought the level of understanding of building occupants and construction professionals on the problem of dampness, and the study was able to identify the different sources of dampness in walls from different buildings across Ghana. It was further narrowed to identify the lead source of dampness in some selected buildings located within 4 climatic zones in Ghana here. And then 3 specific buildings which were within one of the 4 climatic zones, so is the wet semi-equatorial climatic zone, was selected for further investigation to diagnose the lead source of dampness, which was identified from the various buildings surveyed. Several treatment mechanisms to control this lead source of dampness were proposed, and then these treatment mechanisms were explored through the construction of experimental test walls, which were located at the Biako, which falls within one of the vicinity of the 3 selected case study areas. Now, on the screen, we look at some of the key concepts of the problem of dampness in buildings. And when we talk about the problem of moisture in buildings, moisture in a building can create serious problems for the building, its occupants, and then the furnishings which are found inside it. For moisture to be present in the walls of building, there should be a source of moisture, there should be a means or route for the moisture to travel, and there should also be a driving force which will enhance the moisture movement. And literature has shown that there are 3 main sources of moisture, and amongst them are the liquid water sources, which include leakages of all sorts, rain, fog, snow, amongst others. We also have the water vapor sources that include pressure diffusion, sweating, breathing, etc. And then finally we have the soil sources, which talks about the way in which water finds its way into the soil, involving gravity, capillary action, and then absorption. And then there are also certain mechanisms that will enhance the movement of moisture once it finds its way in the walls of a building. We could have the vapor diffusion, where moisture travels from a region of higher vapor pressure to a region of lower vapor pressure. We could also have vapor convection, which is a key mode of transport that is used to move and disperse water along ducts and within spaces. We have the capillary suction, where water moves slowly and progressively through porous materials. And then finally, we can have the gravity flow, which is the most powerful means, by which moisture travels in building materials. So the question that arises now is, what then is dampness? Over the years, several definitions have been given, and these are few. Halim et al. In 2012 defined dampness as the penetration of water through the walls and certain elements of buildings. Hamid and Inga in 2010 also defined it as an excessive moisture which is contained within building materials and components. And then Beckinshaw and Parrott also defined it as the amount of moisture content present in the material. So for the purposes of this study, dampness was identified as water that finds its way into the walls of a building which should not be present in that particular building. Dampness is the major problem of buildings and occurs frequently and contributes over 50% of all known building failures, as has been said already. It is linked to many building deterioration, and it causes damages to brick and block works where they are saturated, decay and breakup of mortar joints, chemical attacks, mold growths and spores, amongst others. Literature groups the sources of dampness into several types, and these are just a few of them. Hollis in 2002 classified the sources of dampness into rising dampness, penetration dampness, condensation, pipe leakages. Beckinshaw and Parrott in 2004 also classified the sources under condensation, penetration dampness, leakages, below ground sources, site or building specific sources. So you could see some kind of linkages or similarities between these. So for the purposes of this study, the sources of dampness were classified into three main sources, where we have rising dampness, penetration dampness, and then condensation. When we talk about rising dampness, we are talking about the capillary suction of moisture from the ground into porous building masonry materials, such as stone, brick, blocks, earth, amongst others. Penetration dampness is the penetration of moisture through the fabric of buildings over a period of time, and usually it is characterized by localized areas of damp or saturated wall or ceiling finishes. Condensation normally occurs where the water inside the building condenses on a cooler surface. Excessive condensation in most cases results in severe mold, which also creates health hazards. It creates damp patches which appear and disappear on a regular basis. Now, before anybody decides to undertake any studies on dampness, that person should be able to follow basic principles. And in doing so, the most important objective of any dampness study is to be able to identify the lead source. We are talking about the most dominant source. And this will aid in the recommendation of treatment mechanisms. And during the course of an investigation, the sense of sight, touch, taste, smell, amongst others, are all very important. And the surveyor should be able to possess all these approaches to dampness investigation. There are four main approaches which a surveyor would want to adapt to undertake any investigation. And amongst them are the visual inspection. Over here, the surveyor needs to record the defects by description, measurement, photographs, and at times make some sketches to indicate the areas which are affected. And then we have the stage 2, which is the non-destructive testing. Over here, the moisture meter is used to inspect the materials or the elements in the construction in place without causing destruction to the fabrics. And at this stage, the investigator or the surveyor is able to eliminate all other sources of dampness, and then the moisture meter will aid the surveyor in identifying the place which is severely affected for further studies to be undertaken. And then we have the stages 3 and 4 approaches, which involve destructive testing and then the laboratory assessment study. These involve causing destruction to the fabric of the building. In the stage 3, more emphasis is placed on sampling, which aims at confirming the moisture conditions within the structural elements by drilling out masonry samples. And then in the stage 4, the samples which have been drilled from the stage 3 is then sent to the laboratory for further analysis to be undertaken. One other important thing is salts in masonry materials. This is gradually becoming a problem. When we talk about salts, it occurs in the building, in the masonry during the construction, or they are absorbed from the atmosphere or groundwater during the life of the building. Efflorescence is a deposit of soluble salts which usually appears as a fine white crystalline powder on the surface of the masonry as the internal water evaporates. 3 conditions must exist for efflorescence to occur in any building. There should be the presence of water-soluble salts in the walls, there should be enough moisture in the walls to dissolve the salts, and then there should be a route for the dissolved salts to travel to the surface where the moisture can evaporate and deposit the salts which can crystallize and then cause the efflorescence. Because of that, simple or instrumental tests can be used in testing for the presence of salts in buildings. However, studies have shown that there are no simple methods available on the market to test for certain salts, like the phosphates and then the oxalates. As a result, it has been recommended that it's always advisable to resort to instrumental analysis like the ion chromatography in a specialized laboratory. Now, when we talk about the ion chromatography, it is a form of liquid chromatography that uses ion exchange resin to separate atomic or molecular ions based on the interactions with the resins. It is greatly utilized to analyze anions and cations, for which there are no other rapid analytical methods available on the market. It's also used whenever diagnosis require a more precise knowledge, not only on the type, but also on the quantity of the cations and the anions which are present in the solution. And then finally, we also look at remedying dampness, some of the measures which people have adopted in various countries to try to solve the problem of dampness. And these, as we see in the table, are just a few of them. Thomas and Tans in 2008 and in 2010 proposed the Kuma method and the dry zone technology. In 2010, again, Gries and Zhang also came out with chemical injection methods to try and address the problem. Later on, Torres and de Freitas, before then, Torres and de Freitas in 2007 had also come out with a wall-based ventilation system to try and deal with moisture in buildings. And then in 2013, Gumeras et al. Also tried to explore all the traditional methods available to see whether they could work or not. And finally, in 2014, Franzoni also decided to follow the trend from Gumeras et al. By also exploring some of the methods which are already in existence. Now, after that extensive review of literature, certain gaps were identified. And it was realized from the literature that there was scanty research into different soil groups and their concentrations that become manifest in different building elements, which are triggered by dampness and various contaminants. And that was stated by Parrott in 2011. Also in 2010, Beckinshaw made it clear that there is still lack of more practical approaches to effective diagnosis and treatment of wall-based dam problems. Because of that, he encouraged that more research will be undertaken to help people out there to understand how to effectively diagnose some wall-based dam problems. And then in 2014, Franzoni also realized there was a lack of a single conclusive technology that is able to provide a complete masonry drying in any condition. As a result of that, he said that the removal of dampness is still an open challenge, and then a thorough and harmonized research effort by the scientific community can boost its solution. So these were some of the gaps which were considered in undertaking this study. In undertaking the study also, several methods were taken into consideration. A mixed research approach was adopted, and the methods which were used have been presented under the various objectives as you can see on the table. For the first objective, which involved identifying the lead source of dampness, data was mainly gathered through questionnaires, checklists, and field observations of about 5,800 selected buildings in Ghana experiencing the problem of dampness. In diagnosing the lead source of dampness, a multiple case study approach was adopted. 3 cases were selected, and then the 4-stage approach to dampness investigation was then applied to be able to diagnose the lead source of dampness. And then finally, in exploring the treatment mechanisms, experimental test walls were constructed and treatments were applied and monitored with time. So this is a breakdown of what has been presented in the table. For the objective 1, a little bit of questionnaire, checklists, and on-site observations were adopted. These enabled the lead source of dampness to be identified and provided a platform for detailed investigation to be undertaken. The results were analyzed by mainly frequencies and then percentages. For the objective 2, which involved diagnosing the lead source of dampness, a multiple case study approach was adopted. 3 cases were selected to follow a replication logic. And that the logic which underlied the use of the multiple case approach in this study was that each case was selected so that either one predicts similar results or 2 produces contrasting results, but for predictable reasons. So this is a description of the 3 cases that were considered. For the case 1, it was a building that was situated in a fairly level or low ground, because studies have shown that for such buildings, they have different soil contents from those in highland areas because of the groundwater conditions, soil types, amongst others. And then the building in case 2 was a building situated on a hilly or high and slopy ground. For these buildings, they are predicted to exhibit slower evaporation rate that will lead to fewer salt attack problems than the lowland areas. And then for the building in case 3 was a building that was situated in a waterlogged area. There is that assertion that for such buildings which are nearer to rivers, they may be prone to salt attacks. This is mainly due to the higher water tables which are experienced by such areas. So as you can see on the screen, these are the 3 cases that were selected. The case 1 is what is being shown there, and then we have the case 2, and then that is the case 3. Now, continuing to the second objective with the methodology that was carried out, we said the 4-stage approach to damp investigation was adapted to be able to diagnose the lead source of dampness in the building. So with a visual inspection, observations of the surrounding areas of the 3 buildings were undertaken. The damp zones were checked, and then we were able to physically identify the causes of dampness based on the symptoms which we identified. Now for the non-destructive testing, it was carried out with the moisture meter, and this helped in identifying the problematic areas. Because of that, grids of about 300 meters by 300 meters were drawn on the surface of the affected walls, and then the moisture contents were recorded on each of the grids. For the destructive testing and then the laboratory assessment studies, after the stage 2, we were able to identify the areas which were problematic, and those areas served as the areas where the samples are supposed to be collected. So mortar samples were collected from those severely affected areas, and then soil samples were also collected from there, just with a view that we are going to be conducting the salt analysis in the laboratory. We should be able to establish whether there is a linkage between the salts which are found in the walls and then those which are found in the ground. And these are some of the equipment that was used in the sampling. We have the cordless drills, we have the carbide drillers, we have the 35mm camera film cases which were used for the samples, amongst others, as you see over there. And this is the rate which was taken to the site to collect the soil samples from one of the case study areas. And then this is the Metron 861 Advanced Compact IC that was used in the ion analysis. Very few countries in the world have threshold values for damaging ions in masonry. The threshold values, which are spelled out in the ONOM 33551, have been adopted by several European countries. And these thresholds have been considered to be on the safe side. And because presently there is none like that in Ghana here, just like other European countries have adopted, I decided to adapt this one for the study. So based on this standard and other related literature on similar studies, a percentage of total ions that exceeded 0.02% for all the ions, be it a cation or an anion, that was identified in any of the samples was considered to be unsafe, and then vice versa. For the objective 3, which involved recommending the treatment mechanisms, field trials were employed to construct 14 prototype test walls. 7 of those walls were made up of blocks, concrete blocks, which were manufactured to standard. And then the other 7 were made up of blocks which were manufactured to what is being sold on the market. Just to be able to see whether the issue of quality control and the mix ratios have impacts on the rise of water in those walling materials. So this is just a layout of how the walls were constructed and arranged on the site. And then in the table here refers to the treatments which were applied to the various walls. SB1 that we see there talks about the standard manufactured concrete block, wall 1. So the one there stands for the first block, and then the CB stands for the commercially manufactured block wall. So we did them coherently. So for the SB1 and then the CB1, we used 0.15 millimeter thick polyethylene DPC to, please let me use this diagram to explain very well. So for this wall 1 that we have here, these ones were constructed based on the standard manufactured concrete blocks. And we had other 7 like these ones also on the other side. So we have SB1 and then CB1, SB2, CB2 in that order. That constituted the 14. So for the wall 1, wall 2, and wall 3, 3 different thicknesses of polyethylene DPCs which are sold and used on the market were purchased and then used for the treatment. For the wall 4 and then the wall 5, 2 chemicals which are also in place in the market for treating some of the dampness problems were also used to see whether they are really effective or not. So the wall 4 was treated with the coral epoxy damp-proof course or damp-proof chemical, and then the wall 5 was also treated with the solvent damp-proof chemical. The wall 6, for the 2 sets of test walls constructed, were left as controls with no treatments applied, just to see whether we'll be able to test the effectiveness of the other methods against that wall, and also to be able to monitor the rise of the water very well. And then the wall 7, for the 2 of them, were also constructed with dense concrete bases, just to be able to see whether if we have concrete bases like that, will it be easier for the water to rise in them or not. So these were the various treatments which have been summarized in the table as we see there. So the pictures we see there are just excerpts from the treatments. So the first one that we see here was when the DPC was being laid. And the second picture that we see there was after the DPCs had been laid. We also have here when the coral epoxy DPC was being applied, and then when it had been applied completely to the wall. And then over here, this is the color of the solvent damp-proof chemical. And then these are the 2 walls after the treatments, the chemicals were applied. So for the first one here, where the pointer is, the one with the black base is the coral DPC, and then the one with the white base is the solvent damp-proof. This is the control test wall that was left without any treatment, and then this is the wall which had a dense concrete base. After this study, some key findings were gotten. It was realized that the lead source of dampness was identified to be rising dampness, because 5,037 out of the 5,800 buildings surveyed showed symptoms which were closely related to the rising dampness. And this can be seen in the charts, that's figure 18, which is shown over here. So these diagrams have been positioned based on the different climatic zones that were considered. So for the 4 climatic zones, the red bar that we see there stands for the rising dampness, the light green one stands for the condensation, and then the blue one stands for the water penetration. So for all the climatic zones, you can see that the red dominated, indicating that rising dampness was severe in many of the buildings that were surveyed. So the symptoms which were identified with some of these walls included surface efflorescence from hygroscopic soils, moisture in timber skirting, dampness at the base of the walls up to 1.5 meters high in horizontal bands. This finding implied that with the root source of the dampness known, detailed diagnosis could then be conducted to ensure suitable remedies to be applied. So for the objective 2, which involved diagnosing the lead source of dampness, which is rising dampness, the four-stage approach investigation was adopted. Now, for the first one, which is the visual investigation, the table here has presented the various stages under the various cases that were looked at. So for the stage one, which was a visual inspection, these were some of the symptoms that were identified from the building in case one. Internal walls were quite healthy, blistering of paints could be seen at height of 100 meters below. Flaking of mortar was present, efflorescence, and then we also saw dampness all around the building. For the building in case 2, we could find cracks in the columns that resulted mainly from salt. Greenish stains was also present, blistering of paints amongst others. And this building also had dampness all around the external walls. And then a similar symptoms were also identified in the building, in case 3. For the non-destructive testing, which is using the moisture meter to identify the areas which are severely affected, dampness was measured along all the walls and across all the walls. And it was realized for the building in case 1, the part which was oriented towards the western side was severely affected. For the building in case 2, the part which was oriented towards the eastern side was severely affected. And then for the building in case 3, the part which was oriented towards the western side was also affected. So these are some of the pictures that were gotten from the stage 1 investigation. The stage 1, this is for the case 1, where you could see blistering of paints on the building. This is case 2, where we could see the horizontal bands over there. And then this color that we see here is a browny yellowish color. That represents that there are sores actually present. And at the time of the visit, you could see that the color over here matched the color on the bare ground. And then this is case 3, where you could see the stains on the wall surfaces and then surface fluorescence also present. Now, because moisture meter was used to measure the moisture content on grids which have been drawn on all the walls, it will be very difficult for anybody to just pick the documents and understand. Because of that, colored contour maps were drawn to represent the moisture contents which were measured on the various walls. And these colored contour help us to identify the areas which have been severely affected and the areas which have not been. So 5 colors were identified. Where we see a green color, it means the moisture content that was measured there was very low, and it ranged between 0% to 0.5%. While there is a blue color, it means the moisture content was low, between 0.5 to 1%. Yellow color means intermediate moisture content between 1% to 1.5. Red color means high moisture content between 1.5 to 2%. And then the purple color stands for very high moisture content between 2 and 3. So as can be seen here, to my immediate left where the pointer is, you could see that all the moisture contents that were measured fell between 1.5 to 3. That is why we see that color red and then the purple there. That means that anywhere within this zone, we can sample either mortar or the block samples and take them to the laboratory for further assessment to be undertaken. And then to my immediate right, we could also see that it was a mixture of the different colors. However, between 11 and 12 were identified to be the severely affected zone, because we could see that the purple color ran across all over there. So again, samples could be collected from this end for the laboratory investigation to be undertaken. So this process was repeated for all the other 2 buildings also, as can be seen on the board. And from the stages 3, which involved the destructive testing, because the stage 2 enabled us to identify the area where which was severely affected, the stage 3 was just brought inside to be able to pick mortar samples from the severely affected areas. So for the building in case 1, mortar samples were collected from the severely affected areas, I mean the areas which showed the red and then the purple colors. And then soil samples were also collected. These processes or procedures were repeated for the other 2 buildings within the other cases. And the stage 4 investigation, the samples were sent to the laboratory and then ion analysis was conducted on these samples. Now we realized that similar salts were identified in the mortar and the soil samples from the 3 cases. And these salts included magnesium chloride, magnesium sulfate, sodium chloride, potassium sulfate, amongst others. But of all these types which were identified, it is sodium sulfate, and magnesium chloride which are more destructive and damaging. And when they are present in the wall, they can cause extensive decay in the masonry. So the implication is that it was realized from the 3 cases that if the various sources of dampness were not attended to, the walls would progressively become wetter through their thicknesses. With time, the walls will deteriorate and associated health issues will be experienced by occupants. The most dominant and dangerous salts, which include magnesium chloride, magnesium sulfate, and sodium sulfate, should be tackled because such salts should be dealt with, because if they are allowed to stay inside there, it will cause deterioration, and if you don't take away time, the structure might collapse where the structural parts are affected. From the objective 3, which involved construction of the prototype walls to control, with equipment to control the lead source of dampness, it's still being the walls are still being monitored, and it has been monitored for a period of 7 months. Now it ended from July 2014 to this time as we are talking about. And 4 months after the walls were constructed and monitored, that's between July and November 2014, which fell within our rainy season, it was realized that all the DPCs that were used in the 2 sets of test walls were functioning. The basis of the test was constructed with the commercially manufactured concrete blocks and treated with the polyethylene DPCs were noticeably wet as compared to those constructed with the standard concrete blocks. In the commercially manufactured concrete block walls, the height of the water rise was a little over 200 millimeters. Thus, the DPCs were placed 300 millimeters above ground level. The water rise in the standard manufactured concrete block was also about 85 millimeters. And when the monitoring was continued between December 2014 and March 2015, which fell within the rainy season, within the dry season, the water levels in the 2 walls had reduced to 85 millimeters and 40 millimeters respectively. So these are the diagrams which showed these ones are the walls constructed in the standard blocks, and then these ones are the walls constructed in the commercial walls. So you can see the water at the basis of the walls. And then 4 months after the control test walls were also constructed and monitored, that was within the rainy season, traces of water were noticed at heights of 201 millimeters for the standard manufactured concrete block, and then 320 millimeters for the commercially manufactured block walls. It was found that in the commercial manufactured block walls, the water had risen above the DPC level. And between December 2014 and March 2015, which fell within the dry season, the water levels in the 2 had also dropped again to 50 millimeters and 95 millimeters respectively. So these are the 2 sets of walls. And then 7 months after the walls, which were treated with the chemical DPCs, were constructed and monitored, it was realized that the opposite and proof and the super DPCs seemed to be working perfectly. Because of the color, it was difficult noticing the rise of any water. Because of that, the moisture was used to test for the various places to see whether water was present, and we recorded 0%, meaning no water had risen in the walls which were treated with the epoxy damp-proof course and then the cement damp-proof course. And then finally, with the walls which are constructed with a dense concrete basis, after the first 3 months initially, we realized that water was present, and this was probably due to the water which was used in the mixing of the concrete. However, after the first 3 months continuing till the 7 months which was steady, we realized that there was no water present at all, because all the water that was present in the concrete had evaporated, and you could be seeing that the walls were functioning sort of perfectly. So from the treatment mechanisms applied to the test walls, it could be said that although the DPCs and the concrete bases are performing well, the epoxy and the super DPCs have performed more effectively. This is a table that summarizes everything I just said. So between August and then October 2014, within the rainy season, these were the various readings that were recorded. So for instance, when you take the standard block wall 1, you could see that in August it was measured as 70 millimeters high. The water rose to 75 millimeters in September. In October it rose to 79 millimeters. And then in November it reached its peak, because that was the peak of the rainy season. And then that was also 81 millimeters. However, between December and February, the water levels started dropping, indicating that the water tables were lower and that the amount of water which were in the walls were actually falling. So this follows for all the other walls which have been shown here. So the orange color which is shown over here talks about the peak values, that is the moisture contents which were recorded were maximum at November 2014, and then in February, as at the time when it was being monitored, the moisture contents had dropped because there was changes in the weather condition, and the moisture contents measured there were minimum. Now, from this objective 3, it can be said that the constructed test walls should offer insights into the potential for moisture to rise in solid block walls from the ground. The proposed treatments have also shed light on the effectiveness of some treatments applied to the walls to control the capillary rise of water from the ground into the superstructure. So in conclusion, it can be said that rising damp was identified to be the lead source of dampness in walls which were steady. In diagnosing the rising damp, the findings revealed that several sources were present. However, of all these sources, The most damaging and dangerous are the magnesium sulfate, magnesium chloride, and sodium sulfate, and they will have to be dealt with. There was also a close linkage between the soils that were found in the ground and that were found in the walls, and therefore confirmed some rise of water from the ground into the walls. And then for the treatment mechanisms, the epoxy and the super DPCs performed more effectively than the other treatments which were applied. There were a lot of limitations which were encountered during this study, and it was realized that many buildings could have been considered as part of the cases selected. However, some house owners would not permit the research team to enter their buildings. This was due to the fear of possible future attacks, as we have in our situation here. The study also focused on diagnosing dampness in only residential buildings. The study did not look into why all those similar sources were identified among the buildings. They were in varying quantities. And then the study only proposed methods for controlling rising dampness in new buildings. It is therefore recommended that other buildings which are located within the other three climatic regions which were not considered should be considered later or investigated later. And then more laboratory tests and scientific analysis on soils should be carried out on buildings with similar problems. Further studies could also be conducted on why the soils which were identified varied in quantities among the buildings. And then in-depth research can also be conducted to identify methods that could be used to treat already affected buildings, existing buildings in Ghana. So in conclusion or in summary, it can be said that this study has been able to provide a more practical approach to effectively diagnosing the problem of rising dampness using 3 different buildings. It has been able to identify different soil groups that manifest in buildings affected by rising dampness. And it has also, these soil groups which have been identified can actually be sold out to certain companies which manufacture chemicals amongst others. Because once you know that these soils are present in the building, they can come out with certain chemicals which, if applied to the walls, can deal with such soils. And then we've also been able to indicate the linkage between the soils found in the ground and that found in the walls of the buildings with dampness. And then finally, the study has demonstrated that a good construction method, good quality walling materials, and appropriate treatment mechanisms can control rising damp in buildings. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I recommend that you do some work. Okay, Chris, are you there?
Yes, I'm still here, thank you.
Okay, so could you start your questions?
Yes, thank you. First of all, can I congratulate you on a very comprehensive presentation? Very good PowerPoint, very well spoken, covered all the main points, and it also answered all my questions. So thank you very much. And I also liked some of your pictures and your cartoons. Very good. Also, thank you very much for your thesis. It's a very good thesis. I very much enjoyed reading it. And particularly for me, I very much liked the combination of research methods. The qualitative survey of the buildings, building your own walls and monitoring those, and the case studies of the buildings. It's very nice to see that collaboratory, real case studies and the qualitative research. So I enjoyed that very much. So I have some small list of questions and I might ask you. First one, following on from your presentation, the walls you built. Are you still monitoring the walls, or has the research finished?
Please, I'm still monitoring the walls. And as at the time of when the final document was presented, I had monitored it for a period of 4 months. But you could see from this presentation that I had added 3 extra months to it. So that means I'm still monitoring.
Okay, good. That's very good. I think is the most original aspect of your work. What hasn't been done before and is very new and original?
Doc, please, can you come again?
Originality.
Yeah,
What?
Chris, can you come again, Chris?
What do you think is the most original aspect of your work?
Okay, thank you very much, Doc. the most original aspects of this work, I can say, fall in two things. And the first one is about the various soils which have been identified in the walls. It has been seen from all the literature that were surveyed. You could see that some of the soils which they were finding were quite different from what was being found here. And that there were few of them which had similarities. And that is the reason why it was proposed that further studies should be undertaken to find out many of the soils which are also present in the building. So I feel that as it is right now, many people are still having problems with the issue of rising dampness because the soils are still prevailing and there are no chemicals on the market to be able to address or control the rising dampness. So with these key soils known or which have been able to identify, I feel that this greatly contributes to knowledge because it will enlighten those in the industry who are involved in coming out with products that will address the problem to be able to look at specific chemicals which they can manufacture to be able to solve this issue of rising dampness. And the second aspect which talks about the originality is that from all the literature which was surveyed, it was realized that all the walls which were constructed were being simulated in the laboratory. And studies have shown that those walls do not replicate a true rising damp scenario. And it was further recommended that if anybody would want to replicate a true rising damp scenario, then that person should get a bare ground, a natural condition, and construct walls and monitor it with time to be able to tell whether water truly rises from the ground or not. And this is what this study has been able to do. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you. If you were to go back
View 4.
Would you have done any of your PhD differently if you could do it again?
Well, one of the issues which I raised was the fact that I was not able to locate buildings or get buildings within all the other 4 climatic regions. The diagnosis actually concentrated on 1 out of the 4 climatic regions that we have in Ghana here. So I would have loved to actually look at buildings located within all the various climatic regions for a broader conclusion to be drawn.
Okay. So, since one recipe, what would you ask them to do?
So please, can you come again?
If you were to now supervise someone else's PhD to a new research,
View 4 on margin.
yes.
I would ask the students to actually look at the areas which were recommended for further studies. For instance, looking at buildings which are actually located within the other 3 climatic regions which were not considered in this study for further studies to be undertaken. Also, I would tell that student to actually construct typical test walls like we have in our case over here in those areas, just for us to be able to draw better conclusions and then get comparisons and see whether situations are the same across all the 4 climatic regions.
Okay, good. Is that example? That's my work. Is anybody going to start that research?
As at now, I'm not very sure, but I'm very sure it will be very soon. Yeah, I'm very sure it will be very soon. Somebody will come in because this is a topical issue in Ghana here. And since the time this study was undertaken, I've received a lot of calls from many people who are experiencing such problems in their buildings. Day in, day out, they call. So I feel there is a lot of work to be done in this area, as have been done outside.
Okay, good, good. on page 71. You surveyed so well done on surveying so many houses. Can I ask why did you survey 1% of the buildings in the southwestern equatorial, 61%, 29% and 9%? Why?
Yeah, thank you very much, Doc. The 4 climatic regions, we have 10 different regions in Ghana here. And all the 10 regions have been classified into the various climatic zones or the climatic regions, which is 4. So for the dry equatorial climatic zone, you can have 4 main regions that fall within that zone. For the wet semi-equatorial climatic zone, there are 3 main regions. For the tropical continental climatic zone, there are 3 main regions. And then for the southwestern equatorial climatic zone, there is only 1 town, not a region. It's actually a town that falls within, and it has fewer buildings. So we decided to just concentrate on some few, and then spend more time on the other regions which are having many buildings spread across. That's why you can see the 1% over there.
Okay. How did you choose the buildings?
Those buildings, as I said initially in the recommendation for further study, it was quite a problem for people to allow you enter their buildings. Because of that, I had to get people within the various
Okay. You mentioned you had some help. You had some trained assessors who helped with the surveying of the houses. Consistency. All being using the same judgment and recording the same information.
Yes, please. Thank you very much for that question again. As I was saying before there was that breakup, going to different buildings within the different locations was quite a problem. Anytime you go there, they would want to know that they know you within that vicinity before they could allow you to enter that particular building. Because of that, we had to get people from the different regions and from the different towns to be able to assist us to undertake that study. And when I talk about the trained assessors, there were many aspects of the work. It does not necessarily mean that they had to do everything. But for instance, when you take the stage 1 investigation, you can have the visual inspection where you have to go around the building. You can have the sketch drawings, you can have this, you can have that. So they assisted in those basic types. And anytime the day ends within that particular day where we survey, we have to meet as a group and then try to discuss everything that has gone on, just to be sure that the following day, if we had to go out, errors which were committed initially would not be committed again. But seriously, from all the discussion, the series of discussions we had, there were no errors at all. Because these were people who really understood what we were doing. And there were people who were in the construction industry, who understand construction, and who see the problem, but cannot do anything about it. So they needed somebody to help them. And then that was the assistance they were able to provide me in carrying out the study.
Excellent. I'm looking at some of your data on page 130. Page 3. Okay, just can I ask you some of the numbers? They are rounded to the nearest 100. So some of your results are 1,100. They rounded up to the nearest 100 in the table.
Yeah, look, that
You
is...
seem better.
very good, Doc. It is true. What we did was, because it was buildings which were being surveyed, it was very difficult, for instance, to get 180.25. It was very difficult to measure 0.25 of a building. So for instance, if you have 180.25 and then 180.50, then that 180.50, it is better rounding it up to 181 as compared to just leaving it as it is. Because it might be difficult measuring 0.5 of a particular building to enable you to visit that building and then do the assessment. So that's why you could see that some of these figures have been rounded. But most of the times they are rounded to their nearest, and it's not very far.
So page 207. There's 207. Okay, interesting. It's very interesting to read. Low-bearing and the non-low-bearing walls. So I was very surprised that so my question is, are there many buildings that are
Chris, can you come up again, please?
so you
Can you repeat the question, please, Chris?
pressing
Yes.
people off? Yes. You mentioned on page 207 that you press rapidly nursing off required by the building code. So I was very surprised by this. So are you saying there are many houses built in Ghana that do not meet the building code and the
Yes, Doc. That is very right. That is very right. There are many buildings like that. Many buildings.
Good. Okay. That sounds bad news. What do you think is the consequence of that?
Could you explain what's the consequence of that?
What do you think is the consequence of many buildings not meeting the building code?
Look, a typical example is what we are experiencing, and that's what we are researching into right now. But many of such buildings even lack adequate site supervision. You go to the site and people are doing whatever they want to do there. At times when you really want to correct them, it is an issue. That leads to a lot of problems. So that is this is one of the consequences. Aside structural failures, this is one of the consequences.
Yeah. These are commercial, so they are made by a company, people buy them, and they are expecting them to meet the building code. So there are some companies selling faulty blocks. And people are making them leave.
Is it a question or a comment, please, Chris?
These are blocks that do not meet the building code.
Are you making a comment on the building code, or you have a question for Kofi? Hello, Chris?
much.
Okay.
Can we take the question again?
Okay. Yes, I was very surprised that many companies are do not mean.
I don't go fit again. I don't go fit. Tire.
I think the main reason that so many buildings have damp problems and structural problems.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think the main reason is that they refuse to follow the basic construction principles. For instance, many of our residential buildings are not actually being constructed by companies, registered construction companies. Somebody gets the money, the person feels is ready to come up with something, just looks around, finds a mason or a foreman, and then they start something. So how do you get people giving out their residential buildings to registered qualified companies to undertake their jobs for them? And that is one of the reasons why.
Yes, I understand. All around the okay. Page 224. 224. Don't get the wall. Often see Congress that concrete was the best at stopping rising down. And it's also expensive. Did you cost techniques? For example, the epoxy and the Suben.
No, thank you. If I understood you right, the cost aspect wasn't considered in this study. And I strongly believe that could also be recommended for further studies. Yeah, I strongly believe it could be recommended. But we did not take into consideration cost aspects at all. It is something which you have to research into to be able to come out with a better cost-effective treatment.
Okay. So, it was possible. Your opinion, what is the most cost-effective treatment?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. So far from the market, the most cost-effective one is the use of the GPCs, that's the damp-proof courses, which we have on the market. That's the most cost-effective one so far that we have on the market. But that or those ones also come with their own disadvantages. Yeah.
Okay. Also, as well as cost, was the quality or the reliability of the method considered? So, the control. For example, applying a method, applying a policy, to apply heavily with a good material, there's a certain quality control aspect. Can all the methods allowed be techniques very robust and can be applied easily?
Yes, Doc. I would say they could be applied easily, provided the right supervision is done. So, for instance, if somebody wants to lay a damp-proof course, and that person that actually doesn't know the right procedures to follow to lay that damp-proof course, it will be present in the building, but water will still find its way around it. In the same way, for the chemical damp-proof courses that we have around, it has to be applied by people who are specialists for it to be able to work. So if you don't get a specialist to apply those damp-proof courses and just get any lay person around, there might be problems. So yeah, that is something small to the question that was asked.
Yes, I agree. I agree. I agree. Okay. Okay. So now, I wanted to ask you about your recommendations. So page 230. You have some recommendations. So can you tell me, please, what are your recommendations for the government, or for the standards, or the guidance? What can the government do to increase the quality of buildings?
Yeah, thank you very much, Doc. I think the best thing to be done is the enaction of laws that we strictly adhere to what the building regulation says we should do on the site. If that is not done, then it will be difficult to achieve better construction in our industry. So the best thing for the government to do to ensure that the building regulations which are in place are actually enforced, those laws are enforced and strictly adhered to, so that the building inspectors and other people we have in our various municipalities can actually do the work they are supposed to do. Otherwise, these problems, they will still prevail.
Okay. So I agree. What do you mean by laws? Because you have a building code that says you have minimum compressive strength. You approved, most buildings don't meet that code. So people are ignoring that law. But do you mean saying building standards and codes, or do you mean a stricter law where people will be prosecuted for breaking the code?
Yeah, Doc, I think that is the best thing. People will have to be prosecuted, because if the laws are there and the laws are not being enforced, then if somebody falls short of it, that person will have to be prosecuted. And I think that is one of the things that will actually help people to be aware that if there are laws and regulations, they will have to be adhered to. Because the industry, the construction industry, I mean, people are just coming in and going out, just like that, because they feel it is easier for them to enter and go out. So that person feels, I have this gadget, I have that gadget, the person just stands up and calls him or herself a contractor. So if those laws are adhered to and people are prosecuted for not abiding by them, then I think it will serve as a deterrent for others to refrain from such things.
Okay. Good. I agree. Have you got recommendations? What's your recommendations for a homeowner? So someone who has a house and they have rising damp, what is your recommendations to them?
Yeah, no, this question seems, it might involve a lot of explanations. But I think the first thing
briefly, quick explanation.
Yeah, the first thing to do is that person should be able to approach an expert in this dampness issues, which most of the times is not done. So for instance, there is a problem with, a building has a problem rising dampness, they just speak to anybody, the person tells them, oh, just tile the basis of the walls, and then it will solve the problem. Many a times they do the tiling and they realize that the water keeps on rising higher. So they will have to approach somebody who really understands the problem of dampness. When that thing is done, then you, the person who has been approached, or the surveyor, should sit them down and talk to them. Make them aware that you just don't look at the building like any medical doctor would do. He or she wouldn't look at you and then tell you, go and buy this drug because I feel this is yours. That person will have to diagnose you, the patient, of a particular thing before he proposes the treatment for you. So you have to make them aware that these stages are supposed to be followed for a better treatment to be given to the building. So if they are willing that all those 4 approaches are followed, where the destructive test will have to be conducted to ensure that we are clear on the ions and other things which are present, then we can go on further to make them aware, give them the necessary report, and then go ahead and then propose any remedy for them. Otherwise it will be very difficult. And that is one of the problems I encountered when I went out. Well, there were many people who were not even willing to let us into their building, though they had a problem. You explain to them and they tell you, if you have to sample water or block from this end, you will destroy my building, I will not let you do it. And that is a very big issue.
Okay, I just have a couple more questions left. An important question is, you've done some excellent work, some excellent research, and you've gained a lot of knowledge on how to cope with damp in buildings. So now, how do you get your research findings, initiate or change in how we deal with damp in buildings? What do we need to do now? We have the knowledge now, we know what's wrong. How do we change the industry, or the people, or the country? How do we change from now onwards?
Thank you very much. No, I think the most important thing done now is that, fine, we've been able to disseminate some of the knowledge which we have gotten from the work, but there is still more to do, because not many of them are really aware of some of these journals we have around where the information has been published. So you have to try and organize some workshops for these people, make them aware that this is the problem, and then this is how best we can all come together and address the situation. So that is something myself and my supervisors we are thinking about, which will start very soon.
Good, good. I agree, and good luck. You have a lot of people to teach, and so very good luck with that. So my last question